The good and the bad of the International Legion. That's what I want to talk about today. I've had so many people recently emailing me and direct messaging me telling me that they are on their way to Ukraine to go apply or join the Legion, which, to be straightforward, is batshit crazy. But you guys know that in every video I say I don't recommend it because how dangerous it is. But if it's your calling, you feel like it's your calling, do your thing, man. I'm grateful that you guys reach out to me, and of course I will answer any questions, give you my advice on anything that you ask about. I want to be clear, and I know I sound like a broken record because I talk about it every single video, but my videos in this page, this YouTube page, is not about recruitment for the International Legion or defending Ukraine. It's strictly about me sharing my experiences and sharing some information that I wish that I knew before I joined the International Legion in Ukraine. Again, one more time, last time at least for this video, I do not recommend going and fighting in Ukraine. It's dangerous as shit. Probability of you getting hurt or dying out there is super, super high. Just be careful, guys. Okay, so let's jump into it. I want to talk about the pros and the cons of the International Legion. Full disclosure and disclaimer up front, the International Legion is an infantry element. You will be an infantryman, maybe some specialties as far as drones or heavier weapons or maybe even armor. But regardless, you're gonna be an infantryman, and being an infantryman in Ukraine sucks ass. It's cold, it's dark, it's dirty, it's boring, but it's the job. You didn't already know that, now you know that. Now let's start with the cons so we can end on a positive note with the pros. One of the biggest cons as far as the International Legion goes, of course, is the language barrier. Having a brigade or an military element with so many different countries, nationalities, races, religions, there's so much diversity, which is incredible. But also at the same time, it makes it very hard to communicate if you get some people on your fire team or in your unit that don't speak the same language as you. While you're in the Legion, while you're in training, they'll typically try to match up people who speak the same languages into the same groups so that you can train together in the same language, and then you'll most likely end up deploying with most of the people in that group that you already were placed with. Then even when you get onto the front, you're going to be very close with other platoons and other brigades who only speak Ukrainian, or maybe it's a Spanish-speaking only platoon or brigade, or maybe you're stationed next to the Georgian Legion. So no matter where you go, there's going to be a language barrier. It's important to just know that off the bat. If you know fluent Ukrainian before joining the Legion, that's incredible. And it'll probably help you in a lot of ways, but you'll still end up running into language barriers in the International Legion because of how many different languages there are. The next con I wanted to mention is the fact that the International Legion is still a baby Legion. It's a baby program in the grand scheme of things. The Legion was only invented and made in 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. It's still very much in its beginning stages of building and structuring a solid foundation and a solid fighting force. So with that said, there could be a lot of confusion within the command structure, some conflicting orders, and even some tension with some of the Ukrainian brigades because they may think that you have a specific duty, but you were told by the International Legion command that you were supposed to do this. So there could be some confusion. It's very much in its infancy stage as far as a full fighting force developed, structured program. Something like the French Foreign Legion that's been around for decades. It's very, very squared away and proper, and the command structure is clear cut. There's no doubt in my mind that the International Legion will be that way one day, and it may even end up topping the French Foreign Legion. I don't know. I think there's a lot of upward potential for the International Legion. But as things go right now, it's young, there's confusion. Keep that in mind. This next one seems kind of silly, but it's so important, and I'll explain why. But one of the cons can be the food. When you're in the training barracks and you're training in the International Legion, you're going over your basic combat skills, what to expect on the front line, how the Russians fight, how the Ukrainians fight, so on and so forth. You spend 6 to 8 weeks in a barracks in a Ukrainian military base somewhere in Ukraine. I won't disclose the exact location. During these 6 to 8 weeks, you are brought food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner by the food truck. Anybody that's in the Legion will understand this. Food truck. I hear that shit in my dreams. Anyways, it's a bunch of locals, mostly grandmothers and mothers, who, out of the kindness of their own heart, prepare bulk meals for all the soldiers in the Legion and even for the Ukrainian soldiers on the base, the rest of the Ukrainian soldiers in your base. Bottom line is, the Ukrainian culture is much, much, much different than what we're used to in the States and what a lot of the Brits were used to, even the Aussies. A lot of different cultures were pretty shocked by some of the food that was made, and these very selfless women that are preparing this food have to make it in bulk, large portions for all the hungry soldiers, right? So you're getting a ton of buckwheat, something that just will give you some nutrition and fill your stomach. There's no flavor. You're getting a lot of cold fish, ton of sausages and hot dogs. Then there's more buckwheat, a lot of fruit, which is cool. And then I don't know if I mentioned this, but buckwheat. You're gonna eat so much fucking buckwheat by the time you leave Ukraine, you'll never want to see that shit again. Luckily in my platoon, Charlie, when we deployed to the front line, we actually had a Ukrainian soldier who was attached to our Legion element who cooked for us breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And this guy was just a savage chef. He made some of the best meals I had the entire time I was in Ukraine, including at some of the restaurants and stuff while I was on leave. So there are some circumstances where even in the Legion, on the front, wherever, you could get some good meals, but while you're in training, it's gonna be a bit grueling for a bit. Something that I also do consider to be a con, other people may consider to be a pro, is that the International Legion is mostly regarded as a special forces military element. The Legion has had their hands in almost every single major conflict in this war so far. So you will absolutely be put into the sketchiest situations that are happening in the conflict. You're not going to be stationed back in Western Ukraine watching a military base or an ammo cache or something like that. They're going to say, hey, most people are dying over here. We need more people to fill those positions. This is where the Legion's going. That's an extremely important thing to realize. And even though they consider the International Legion to be somewhat of the special forces element, you're not really equipped with special forces gear unless you bring your own. So you're going into some of the most dangerous situations possible to be in with the same gear as the Ukrainian soldier who's 3,000 kilometers away from the front line. So that's also important to realize. Another thing that I feel like should be known across the board before you go, at least go to the front line, is that friendly fire on Legionnaires is pretty common. Because there is such a diverse group of people entering into the Legion, let's say they're actually pretty physically fit, they're okay mentally, they make it through the entire training process, and then they get deployed to the front line, but they completely panic on the front. We've seen some unexperienced Legionnaires shoot other Legionnaires in the back of the leg, the back of the shoulder. They panic and freeze when the fighting starts. So unlike other Ukrainian military elements who understand what combat's like, they've been through it for years, occasionally you get a Legionnaire who didn't fully understand what they signed up for. When they get to the front, they end up causing chaos and putting their teammates in danger. When you're in your position on a mission in a trench line or in your position on the front, what the Russians will do a lot of the time is what they call recon by fire. So they'll take a couple of pop shots over where they think the Ukrainians and the Legionnaires are in hopes that we will return fire so they can zero in on our position. So with that in mind, we had this younger Irish kid, nice kid, but he was in our platoon and he was out on his first mission. The Russians were doing a little bit of recce by fire, trying to find out where the Ukrainians' positions were, and this Irish kid was way too jumpy. He ended up firing 9 magazines out of his AK and throwing 5 frag grenades towards the enemy lines, all because there was just a little bit of recon by fire happening by the Russians. Needless to say, this Irish kid gave away the entire Ukrainian and Legionnaire position by panicking and fighting absolutely nobody. Luckily, there were no dire consequences of this. This is a perfect example of what I mean by you may get some unexperienced guys who make their way through the whole process. They get to the front line and put multiple people's lives in danger because of their actions on the front. Okay, this last con, which is kind of 2 different parts in my opinion, but it has to do with corruption. Before I went to Ukraine, I did some research on the corruption because that was one of the red flags that I kept hearing before I went to Ukraine. And in my first couple of months in Ukraine, I didn't see anything that had to do with corruption. But the longer that I was there, I was able to kind of see behind the fog, if you will. I could see where this corruption was taking place. It came in the way of certain commanders or certain leadership elements would be allocated huge sums of money, usually donated by the West. These sums of money were supposed to go to their troops, the infantrymen, the armor. This was for new supplies, food, water, weapons, vehicles. And we would hear that our platoons or our brigades were getting donated and we were getting a lot of funds allocated to us, but we were always low on everything. We weren't getting the vehicles that we were supposed to be getting. We weren't getting the anti-armor munitions or more ammunition that we needed. So I started asking around and kind of putting 2 and 2 together, and I realized that somewhere down the line where this money's being allocated, where the money's coming from, and then us at the end, the frontline troops, it's getting lost in between here somewhere. Lost, right? People are pocketing this money, taking some, whatever it is. I don't know who, I don't know how that works, but that is a thing. I've seen multiple articles of the Ukrainian armed forces cracking down on this corruption. Zelensky's aware of it, and he's fired multiple people and relieved a lot of these Ukrainian commanders of duty who have been caught doing this stuff. It's going to be much different than, for instance, the U.S. military, from my understanding, where if somebody in a leadership position was caught stealing thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars that is supposed to go to their men, this person would go straight, they'd get court-martialed, go straight to prison, Gitmo, I don't know, but they would be in a lot of trouble. And also, from my understanding, that stuff gets snuffed out pretty quick in the US military because of how structured everything is with different checks and balance systems. Ukraine doesn't have these systems in place, and I think it's a lot easier than people realize for maybe some commanders who don't have great moral judgment to pocket this money because they realize how much they're getting from Ukraine's Western allies. I'm sure there's more cons that I'm not thinking of right now, but if there are, I'll make a part 2 of this video. Let's move on to the pros. Dude, I'm sweating, completely sweating through my shirt. This is outrageous. Okay, one of the cool things about being in the International Legion is the fact that you are contracted with the Ukrainian Armed Forces. So you are considered to be a soldier of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, get all the same benefits as the soldiers, including free healthcare, stuff like that. And you're also getting paid. When I went to Ukraine to help, I did not realize that this was a paid position. And I also didn't realize that Ukrainian soldiers are some of the most well-paid, is one of the most well-paid positions in Ukraine right now because of how bad they need them. So I believe while I was in the Legion, we were making anywhere between $1,500 to $2,000 a month USD, depending on leadership roles, promotions, positions. I'm sure that stuff changes, and that baseline pay that I just mentioned could already be different as well. It's been a year since I've been there. Obviously, if you were in this for the money, there's a lot of alternatives that you could do that are much less dangerous, and you can make a lot more money. So if anybody was in this for the money, no, this would not be your most lucrative profession. In my opinion, it's just a bonus, and the cost of living in Ukraine right now is dirt cheap, obviously. So a few bucks goes a long way while you're out there. Another pro about the International Legion is the people that you meet. I've mentioned this in past videos before. The people I met out there in Ukraine in the International Legion are absolutely my family to this day. They are my brothers, they are my sisters. You meet so many people from different cultures, like I said, races, ethnicities, religions, and none of that really seems to matter much while you're out there because the common goal is helping defend Ukraine and fight Russians. So the odds of you coming out of the International Legion, hopefully, with multiple lifelong friends from countries all over the world is very, very likely, assuming everybody was lucky enough not to get hurt or killed out there. What's nice too is it's easy to make friends while you're out there in the Legion because everybody there, for the most part, has very similar mentality. Everybody's a little bit batshit crazy because they know how dangerous this is. But most Legionnaires' heart's in the right place. They came to help. They know all these guys came to help. It's really easy and it happens really quickly to build that camaraderie and that brotherhood. Another really cool element of the International Legion, and this is one of the parts that I believe gives the International Legion a huge upside potential to become a massive organization for foreign fighters. But it's the fact that you're getting so much diverse knowledge from so many different militaries and different branches within each military. I'll give you an example of what I mean. Our lead commander while we were in training in the Legion was a ex-Special Forces German soldier. The second I see the guy right under him was an ex-Special Forces Polish soldier. And then the guy right under him was an American Marine. So during training, you're getting some of the best tips and tricks and skills from all these different militaries. It ends up just being this huge plethora and melting pot of knowledge. You end up getting just priceless knowledge from these extremely experienced soldiers from different militaries all over the world who have different tactics than the next. For example, one of the times we were doing CQB training, one of the Polish soldiers who was also on a SWAT team in one of the big cities in Poland showed us how they trained to do CQB. The next day we had a South African Special Forces soldier show us how he does it, how they were taught to do it. So to me, that part is just, it's such a cool aspect of the International Legion. You're getting information that nobody else can get. It's just some awesome stuff to know that you're not going to get anywhere else but the Legion. Another benefit of the International Legion is the fact that if you finish your contract, which now is different than when I was there, I believe they have minimum of 6-month contracts. So if you go and you want to join the Legion, you have to sign a 6-month contract. You can only break it for some emergency reasons, sickness back home, illness, pregnant wife, whatever. But once you finish your contract, you can obtain Ukrainian citizenship. You can get, if your home country allows dual citizenship, you can become a Ukrainian citizen. I think that's pretty badass. Another cool part of the Legion is that since you are technically in the Ukrainian armed forces, when you're in the Legion, you do get issued the same gear as every other Ukrainian soldier. So you'll get issued rifles and uniforms and plate carriers and helmets, all kinds of stuff if you didn't spend, the thousands of dollars to bring your own kit. With that said, it's not bad gear at all. I would consider it to be average to above average gear. You've got the funds, get your own shit. I promise you won't regret it. Another humbling part of being in the Legion, and definitely a pro in my opinion, is the fact that Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian citizens alike look at you like you're a superhero. Like I said, it's extremely humbling. If you're on leave and people find out that you're a Legionnaire, they'll try to buy you food or get your coffee for you or give you stuff, and the kids will run up to you and try to give you stuff and ask you questions. But even on the front line, I've mentioned this in previous videos, but when you go on a mission, you're always attached to a Ukrainian brigade of some kind, a Ukrainian unit of some kind. I've seen a lot of these Ukrainian soldiers go from just down in the dumps, exhausted, looking like they hate their lives, to be honest, and they realize there's going to be a Legionnaire fire team or unit that's coming with them on this next mission. Their attitudes perk up. They're like excited. They want to come shake your hand. It's a very cool thing. It's in my opinion, that's a pro. Which leads me to the next pro of the fact that you'll always be with a Ukrainian unit. Even if they're not shoulder to shoulder with you on the mission that you're going on, they're typically very close by. I've seen other foreign fighter elements out there in Ukraine that are not tied to the Legion and they're not contracted with the Ukrainian armed forces. They have no Ukrainian support necessarily. They're kind of rogue. They kind of go do their own specialized missions. They're not attached to a unit like the Legion is. To me, it was definitely comforting going on these missions and, going to our trench lines with the Ukrainian unit full of guys who have been doing this for months. They could walk that infill and exfil with their eyes closed if they had to. They knew where the landmine fields were. They knew where to walk, knew where to dig trenches. They knew everything. It takes a lot of the variables out and confusion out when you're with a group that knows what the hell they're doing. And the last pro that I'll mention here, as far as the Legion goes, is the fact that you do get training. Like I said, with some of these more rogue units who kind of just go out with their own group of guys, they're not tied to the Legion or tied to the Ukrainian armed forces. They're not getting, this basic combat training, this structured training regimen that the Legion is forced to go through before they deploy. For someone like me who had zero military experience going into a combat zone, my time training was extremely valuable. You gotta soak in a lot, you gotta understand a lot quickly. As I mentioned before, I was a firefighter and an EMT. I had some basic knowledge of certain things as far as soldiering, but there's so much that I didn't know and probably so much that I still don't know. But I definitely felt more confident after my 6 to 8 week training period before deploying. Now, granted, if you're straight out of MARSOC or you're a SEAL that just left the military, maybe the Legion isn't for you. Maybe you need to be in one of those rogue units, super high speed, way behind enemy lines doing crazy shit. But for me, the Legion ended up being pretty much perfect. There's one more con that I've got to bring up here because I talked to my dad the other day and he mentioned this. He said, you should tell whoever's watching your videos how much their family's going to think about them while they're in Ukraine. And this is such a good point. You're still close or somewhat close with your family, even if you're not, and they know that you are going to Ukraine, they're going to be worried sick. If they know anything about the conflict currently, the state of it, I guarantee they're going to be worried about you and thinking about you every single day you're gone. It doesn't matter your age. There was a guy that was 60 something that was with me in the Legion at the time who would call his mom daily because she was worried sick about him. Keep that in mind. This may be something that you feel a calling to do, but make sure it's something that your family can handle. Make sure it's something that they're willing to mentally go through once you go out there. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just a you thing. Going out there and dying, to be honest, that's easy. It's the rest of the people that have to live with your death that are going to be miserable, that really have a shit time. So just take some of those things into consideration. I'm not your fucking dad, but I do wish somebody had mentioned that to me before I went. With that said, I want to mention this. I see almost daily in the news and some of these other channels that I follow, American, British, Canadian kids, 18, 19, 20, 21, are dying out there in the International Legion or in some other element, foreign fighting element, fighting the Russians. When I first joined the Legion, there had been, I think, like 15 American deaths. At the time, I believe I knew of three of them. There is a lot more than that at this point, to the point where it's not even making headlines anymore. When you have foreign fighters dying over there, it's extremely common. That's all I got for this video, you guys, the pros and the cons of the International Legion. I hope some of you guys find value in this. Please keep emailing me, messaging me. Like I said, I'll answer any questions that you have to the best of my ability. I'm getting closer and closer to monetizing this channel, so do me a favor, like, subscribe, share. just, share it to one person, share it to somebody you may think find value in this. It's a very specific group of people who watch these videos that most likely have friends that would enjoy the same kind of content. Send it to one of them. Anyways, I'll have some more videos up this week. I love you guys. I'll see you next time.